No, I just truly believe that humanity, I can't tell you that as an editor I have to interview people who want to do work either for, in print in particular, and they don't have good communication skills. Or they have excellent communication skills, but they haven't studied history. They don't know how to put material in context. And that's fine if maybe you're writing an obituary, but even still, but truthfully, there's, you have to have a basis to work with to be able to understand how to ask the right question. If what you're being told makes any sense, how do you know that what you're being told is truthful or not? And it's our job to keep pushing the envelope and ask the uncomfortable questions in a smart way so that it's not confrontational and you're not throwing someone against the wall, because I disagree with that type of journalism. I find it offensive. But I find that those are the students who went through programs that were tailor-made for a specific degree, but didn't really do the student the justice that they need. And that's why I'm such a big fan of humanities and liberal arts in general. And then you can go do your first 2 years, in my mind, first 2 years that has a heavy concentration in liberal arts, and then go off and be an engineer. But I can tell you that I just find that getting back to that and acknowledging the importance of that, and I think in Miami, with what we're seeing with the museums that are coming up, with the Arts Center, with the push for understanding and bringing students in, and we have the Cleveland Orchestra that participates now. I think these are things that just makes us that much better. And it's not because we know classical music enhances mathematical skills. It's because it frees the spirit as well. And if you can do better in math, well, God love you for it. But anyway, David.
Walking over, you mentioned that your youngest child seems to be moving towards a career in the humanities, and that you apparently are encouraging this.
I hope that he really does. I hope he does, because I think, first of all, I think it makes him happy. He loves Dostoevsky, and he brings out a smile in me just by saying that. And I think that if it makes him happy, he's going to find his way no matter where life takes him. And I find that we shortchange the importance of trying to help young people find what makes them happy, as if happiness doesn't have a value. And happiness has everything to do with what makes life right. And helping them, guide them towards, even if it's a major that's not going to make you a subject of the front page story of the Wall Street Journal, which sometimes is flattering and sometimes they're not, they're going to be happy. And this is, and I know people are telling him, well, then of course you'll want to study law, and maybe he will. Although my father-in-law, Maurice, would say, we have too many lawyers already. But truthfully, whatever, and I just say, whatever makes him happy. And that's going to be, and if he's happy, then I, as his mom, will be happier even still. So, Michael.
That was a terrific talk and a terrific explanation of why the humanities are important. And I think you went beyond that because you exuded a kind of optimism for where the humanities are going and how the humanities will be seen in society. And as you were talking, I had to ask myself, what's the source of your optimism? Why do you feel so optimistic about the place of humanities?
Well, I'll tell you that, first of all, it sounds counterintuitive, but cities are beginning to realize that you make money with the arts, and so they're beginning to invest in the arts. But in order to have a healthy civic and a center of humanities in any community, for it to be productive, you have to train people who will go there. And so what they're doing is that they're hitting the early schools, they're hitting elementary schools. And so they're taking kids and they're partnering with the public school system and taking them to art venues. And so they're beginning, and even though the parents don't have that background or skill set or ability in order to be able to participate in that, the school systems are providing discounted tickets or free tickets for families to be able to go and to participate and become consumers of the arts. And so once you get the younger generations to understand it and love it, and I was able to go to one that the Cleveland Orchestra did, and they have a Venezuelan conductor who's doing it, and he had the kids, they were grade school children, and he was playing Mozart, but then he would change the beat and he would jazz it up and then slows it down. Those kids were on their feet and they were clapping, they were feeling it. And those kids go home and then they tell their parents, guess what, there's this thing called the Arts Center, and the parents will say, yeah, it's next to where the Heat play, and they'll say, yeah. And they'll say, but guess what, you can do music there, and I want to learn how to play a musical instrument. And you're beginning to see, even though you see in schools that the money that's being put into music classes is going down, parents are beginning to say, my child wants to play music and they'd like a band in the school, and there's an awareness. It's not an overnight process, but it just came because people are beginning to say, well, you know, you can make a lot of money through the arts. Because then people, after that, then they go to restaurants, and then they go to clubs, and then they go to hotels, and it really does have a trickle-down effect. And so that's where it's beginning. But the arts world also realized that they had to penetrate early education. Because if you try getting kids in college, that's too late. You've got to start very early. And it doesn't hurt to say, you know, the arts helps also the brain develop spatially. And so it also has a trigger that also does actually help in the study of mathematics. And so when we look at this and we see how it's interconnected, and we see the public sector beginning to say, and it's not easy, I mean, the work that's had to be done in this community to take us to where we are today with the arts, we had to take elected officials dragging, kicking, and screaming because they had zero interest and or desire to do that. Now we're beginning to say, now we have something we can be proud and excited about, and now everybody's going to say that they were involved and responsible for all this magnificence that we have around us. But I don't have to tell you how difficult it is to get people to come around to something that might be foreign to them. But it only really became because they realized that this was going to be something that was going to be a boost to tourism for our community. And in a city like Chicago, where arts has something that's been fundamental, they had to come back and recreate it and reinvent it in order to bring back new investment and stimulate community once again. And that's what this is all about. It's about building community. We might look at, and one of the big focuses is that, you know, we always look towards DC as if that's the answer to everything. If you want to see innovative thinking anywhere, look at a city. Look at how states are dealing with issues. That's where you get the big change. You look at Washington, D.C., and we were debating those things earlier, but Washington, D.C. is as stagnant as it can be. It's doing the same things and trying to deal with things the same way for the last 50 years. Cities can't do that. State legislatures can't do that. Now, I'm not saying that state legislatures do everything that's good, but on the city level, where we have the opportunity to really be factors of change, that's where you see big differences. And I think that comes from the push and the drive, and also civic literacy, where we're teaching people about civics courses and being involved. I don't know how it's going to play out further down the road without main media, local media sources. That's one thing that we're going to find as we go along the way. I don't think newspapers are going to go extinct like some people do. I think we're all going to be finding ourselves more and more on a screen of various size. But I think there's going to be a place for print, and I think it's going to be more towards the European model than not. And it's going to be a reduced subscriber base. but it's going to be the movers and the shakers who are going to be making the difference. Because it's going to be a product that's not breaking news, but it's helping put news in context through more analysis and more commentary. And I'm very optimistic about that. And I'm very optimistic about the growth and the opportunity of the arts. I just really see that parents are getting really upset at the lack of funding and funding being cut in the arts. And they're finding it that, that their children are the ones who are really asking for it. And when we look at the partnership that we have with New World School of the Arts, how can you not continue to contribute to that? And I'll tell you something else that came out a couple of days ago. Juilliard is opening up a campus in China. And once you start seeing that the Chinese are competing with us, all of a sudden we're going to say, oh my gosh, man, we got to invest in this because the Chinese are taking over.
So I don't necessarily want to talk about the stadium, but I think it would be useful to hear you reflect on sports in American life, because it's just so ironic that 2 years ago we had a recall election around the stadium, and now it's come up again.
I know.
And either we don't learn our lessons, or we're hopelessly inflicted with sport, or the money is the real driver, which was your point just a moment ago in terms of arts and the business community. So would you talk a little bit about sports? What do you see in terms of sports that enables this phenomenon to be recurring in such a short period of time after so many harsh lessons were learned?
It's astounding that we're back. It's like Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
Except this time, the amount of investment that we put in sports facilities just blows me away. And it's not that I'm not a sports fan. It's just that where are your priorities, and what is the best value for the dollar that you can get as a result? These entities, and right now, of course, you're referring to the Dolphins Sun Life Stadium. And we're looking at the amount of contribution from the public sector is small in comparison of what you look at by the Marlins side. But this is where we go back to the issue of public sector, but public sector not being lobbied appropriately by citizens. Though, when you look here, you look at the issue of this is being done in Tallahassee and totally taken away to a great degree from the local community until it's done, almost signed, sealed, and delivered. Because by the time it's finished in Tallahassee, I don't care what anybody says down here, it's been approved down here. Maybe not officially on the dais, but somewhere along the line. But I do think that there's an overemphasis in the promise of what sports can deliver, and what sports can deliver even in a trickle-down effect to the rest of the economy. And I'll tell you why. Because first of all, stadiums are self-contained entities. You go in there, you're entertained, you eat and drink and so on and so forth. And when you leave there, you have no desire to go to a restaurant. You might go to a hotel if you're visiting, but other than that, you're not. And even here with the Dolphin Stadium, that are saying, well, like here, but that's going to be, that's going to be sales tax that's exempt, that the sales tax would go, that's sales tax dollars that's being used that could be going to education or to something else. Well, the bed tax, that goes to tourism, but that's monies that could be used to be applied in a different way. It's still our dollar. It's still our money. And when you look at this, and not only that, and I have to say, and I say it with all due respect to University of Miami uses that facility as well, and I don't see anybody saying University of Miami should have some type of contribution to Sun Life as well. What I can tell you that if the county should choose to strike a deal, then it should be a deal that really benefits the entire community in multiple ways, and not just immediately, but for generations to come. And that's where you say, well, then open up a foundation, that it's going to be a foundation that goes to funding scholarships. Or you do a foundation, you know what they did in Chicago? In Chicago, they did one where they did something where, I don't know what the sports team in Chicago is called, whatever they're called, but they had to do something for veterans. You strike a deal, The Bears? Okay. You strike a deal where they give something in perpetuity through a foundation. But we have this thing here where you don't want to give money to an educational facility or a hospital or social services, but boy, oh boy, have a multi-billion-dollar sports franchise come around, and all of a sudden, we can do it. And for the life of me, you know, God bless the Dolphins. They've been good corporate citizens. I'm not saying that they're not, but holy moly, you know, Steve Ross has $4.4 billion according to Forbes. You know, it's just a drop in the bucket for him. Or just say to the county, could you loan us the money and we'll repay it over time with interest? How's that? It's a privately owned company. It's a privately owned company, and everybody who owns that is a millionaire. And I just don't understand why they say, well, we're not paying for that, a tourist from Iowa is paying for that. The allocation of those funds is being used in a way, it's our dollar that's being used and allocated in a certain way. And maybe there's a better, maybe the convention center enhances the community better. But if we're going to make a deal with the Dolphins, and I'm not sure that everybody says, well, it couldn't be worse than the Marlins. I remember having a professor once saying, never say things couldn't ever get worse. They really can. But let's get it right. Let's do it the right way. And let's see if just say, okay, Dolphins, I'll throw this one out to you. You know, partner in higher education with us. Do something with the additional revenues you say are going to come, and have a commitment to our community that truly benefits us, because you know what? If I don't own the Fontainebleau, I don't know that I'm really going to get anything back that the Fontainebleau makes more money. And not only that, the Dolphin Stadium, many of the hotels are going to be filled. They're going to be filled in Broward County. There's nothing you can do to stop that. So if the Dolphins want this from Miami-Dade County government, and you're a mover and shaker, have them make a deal. Have them make a deal with the community in a way that's really lasting and enhance, not just for the immediate future, but for generations to come. But you ask somebody who's, you know, sits on a dais and they're just so convinced that sports is going to give us a Super Bowl. And I'm not saying a Super Bowl is a bad thing, to the contrary. But truthfully, I don't understand. I think the nature of sports has gotten out of hand. I think the contracts they provide baseball players is obscene when we look at what a college professor can get, or when you look at, you know, a nurse, a police officer, a firefighter, a journalist. I mean, people in television. My producer, Fabiola Rodriguez, is here. Thanks, Fabi. She's my producer for Issues. It's astounding, but it's society that's not standing up and saying we don't have our values in the right place, and that's where I think the conversation needs to continue to change and to drive that, because we don't have to have things that are either or propositions, but we do have to stop being foolish, and we do have to stop giving things away, and we do have to start thinking of what are proper and good investments for our community. Yes.
In Miami, if you're bilingual, then on your menu you have, well, twice the amount of humanities and twice the culture. And so I was wondering if you could comment on that aspect of, well, our particular urban environment.
We're in such a unique place where we flip in and out of worlds without batting an eyelash, and is particularly when you look at the richness of the cultures that are here, and a very sophisticated population as well, I might add. And we're so blessed that not only are we enjoying sophisticated conversations, and we have so much to offer in the world of academia in English, it's also offered in Spanish, which is absolutely amazing. And you would think that they live parallel lives, and I think that used to be the case in the past, But today I find that it's not that, it's absolutely complementary. And I can tell you, my family had founded a newspaper, Diario Las Americas, and recently it was sold and it was bought by a group of Venezuelans. And that tells you how Miami begins to shift once again. And it's because we have now not just Caribbeans, but people who come from the Caribbean, but now we have people from South America who are saying, we're going to invest here and this is going to be home. And when I look at the richness and the culture, and that's one of the things that, I really have to say that my father-in-law, Maurice Ferre, and my dad, Horacio Aguirre, worked really hard, which was to instill and nurture the arts and humanities in Spanish to a great degree. I'm not sure what kind of a Spanish-speaking population we would have today if we didn't have Diario Las Americas, which is not to say that, and this was founded in 1953, it's not to say that, from 59 onwards, that the Cubans weren't going to come here and create something big and wonderful on their own. They were. But it was actually a groundbreaking platform that in 1953, way ahead of the curve, and by the way, the reason they decided to do it in Miami is because they knew jet planes were coming and they were going to be able to print a paper that they were going to be able to send to Central and South America, never imagining in a million years that there was going to be an enormous Spanish-speaking population living permanently in South Florida. But we have a gift here where we see on campuses such as FIU degrees that are offered in Spanish, and a number of visiting professors and centers that focus on Latin American and Caribbean studies. And we have it at University of Miami, we have it at Barry University, and we have Miami-Dade College also serving Spanish-speaking populations as well. And I think whereas before that might have looked like a detriment because we weren't assimilating, to the contrary. It's what makes us unique, it's what makes us exciting, it's what makes South Florida ahead of the curve. Everybody's talking about, well, what's going to happen by 2024 and we're going to have this population of 50 million Hispanics, blah, blah, blah. That's Miami. We are that world that everybody's talking about. We're already there. And we're just showing how doable it is and how it is the gateway to the Americas and how it does bring tremendous understanding. And not without conflict and not without difficulties. Holy moly, I remember the Leon Gonzalez days, and those were like, it wasn't even that long ago. But, the earth does shift and we move, and as a community, I think we're moving in the right direction. And we're embracing, that Creole is a language that exists here. The Archdiocese is building a terrific, a beautiful, and I invite you to go see it as it's being built, beautiful chapel which looks like a miniature cathedral on Northeast 2nd Avenue and 62nd Street where Notre Dame High School used to be. And it's just amazingly beautiful, but it just shows you our strength as a community, that we're embracing other cultures and do it with pride. And I think that's what makes a really great city.
Back to the Spanish question, El Diario used to have this wonderful columnist, Olympia Rosado.
I know.
And she
I used to cringe having to speak in front of her because I knew she would find a million ways to correct my Spanish.
She would write this column, Conoce usted su idioma. And I guess she was like hyper-grammarian. It was a wonderful column. And
she died today hearing what you hear today.
Well,
the Spanglish.
Well, that's sort of my
not
question,
even so much Spanglish, but for those who speak Spanish, I remember hearing somebody say, you know how you hear in English, and English is such a compact language, it's so much fun, but you say, the bullet, entered the chest and exited through the back, and so somebody said, la bala excitó por la espalda. And it was like, you can't, it doesn't, some things just don't translate well.
She was wonderful.
She
so you
was,
knew her, you know who she was.
I knew Olympia. She was a powerhouse. She was this tall. She loved language, and she was a true lady, and she had a love and a passion for language and for grammar and for being the best you can be. And she was, and there's been nobody really, maybe Rosa Leonor Whitmarsh might be somebody who could possibly replace her, but not quite in the same way. An extraordinary intellectual. And that's one thing that I'll tell you that I've learned from my experiences with the Cuban American community, with the Cuban community, is that Cuba was a place where, man, no matter what you studied, they were really well educated and the level of culture was extraordinarily high. And there was a passion and a love for humanities in particular. And I think that really shows to this very day.
I just wanted to share a concept with you as you were talking. I was thinking about this book that was written by a sociologist, Edward Shills. It's called The Order of Learning. And in the book, he talks about the universities and the roles that they play in society. And he made the point that he felt that he broke down different disciplines, that it was the arts and sciences. Now, he did not say the humanities, but I think in it stripped to its core, he meant the humanities. That ultimately served as the conscience for the university. So I'm just curious whether you think you could roll that roll that back to the humanities in terms of, you know, you talked earlier about that constructive criticism and responsible citizenship. I'm just wondering whether you could roll the humanities back to essentially, among other things, having a primary responsibility to be a conscience for aesthetics, for ethics, for comportment in general.
I couldn't agree with you more in that that humanities forces us, if you study it properly, forces us to ask profound and difficult questions to answer. And that's where the conscience part comes in. And you can be a brilliant scientist, but if you have no moral compass, how good can you be? And I think when we talk about morality, and I'm not talking about, you know, social mores that change and modify with time, but there are certain fundamental moral truths that never change. Certain fundamental moral principles that can never change. The value of human life, the importance of human rights, the importance of a democracy, and the dignity that it provides to man. And I see that this is where humanities plays a critical role in driving those conversations and awareness. Not only, and one of the things that I love about South Florida in particular, and how aware we are of the plight of others, because here, foreign, you know, when we look at international stories, and that's local news for us. And it's because we are so acutely aware that if we don't help another, and in this case, another country in need, we put ourselves in danger. Because we all came from a place where that was the case. And so I think that's why in particular humanities in a community like ours is so much strengthened, because we are so much more sensitive to the meaning of loss, of intellectual loss. Where property, do you notice no one talks about loss of property? It's loss of opportunity. Loss of time with loved ones. That's what's lamented. And I think that's what makes us particularly unique, because even though we don't say the word exiles too much, on many levels, many of us are exiles one way or another. And I think that's become a real integral part of our social fabric. And I think that's one of the things that really drives the social and moral compass of our community in particular. And it's something that I hope that through the process of assimilation, we never lose. And I don't think we will through the, strengthening and talking about the importance of humanity. And that's considering that we have leadership that on many levels that don't understand that are just looking for economies of scale, that are trying to, you know, squeeze the biggest bang out of the buck. And you know what really worries me about that? That we're degrading the value of a diploma. Because if you can do it for the price of, you know, I don't know, a subscription to a news magazine, what are you really getting? And what are you really saying? You know, in Spanish, you know, people come here for the first time and they say, you know, this is the country where you have to have everything documented. Everything has to be on a piece of paper. You know, es el país de los papelitos, de los títulos. But it's not necessarily saying that there's a value to that degree. And I think we have to go back to the idea of putting value in what we do so that the degree has that greater value. But that requires that we partner in smarter ways with higher education, or education on every level. Because if you cheat pre-K through 12, then you're going to have to be importing students in order to get the student body that really challenges your professors and does what you need for FIU. So I don't want to say that we're going to challenge education on any level, but in higher ed, you're in a place where you can provide that critical voice in ways that other communities can't. And to build that growing awareness and that partnership with the business community. You want a thriving business? Well, then I can tell you that business follows talent. Groom the talent. But in order to do that, it's important that you go lobby Tallahassee for your funds, but the best ones to lobby for that is the business community. They're the ones that make the difference. They're the ones that can make that challenge much more, less of a challenge and more of a reality. But through that, we have to have a community that understands that, and will understand that through that moral compass that isn't always so evident, but I think is still more there than that.
It's a terrific note to end on.